Rain pelted the windshield as Laila Hampton clutched the rejection letter, her fingertips turning white against the paper. Unfortunately, the sellers have accepted another offer, the third such excuse this month. Through the blur of raindrops, she watched as a white couple emerged from the house they'd been told was no longer available, shaking hands with the same smiling agent who, just yesterday, had looked at her family with that familiar hesitation in his eyes. In that moment, with her children's reflections in the rearview mirror, Laila knew exactly what was happening, and this time, she wouldn't just drive away. Before we continue this powerful story, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. Your support helps us continue sharing these important narratives of resilience and justice. Now, let's return to Laila's story. The Hampton family had always been planners. Laila, with her meticulous librarian's mind, kept spreadsheets tracking their savings for a down payment. Terrence, whose IT expertise had finally earned him the promotion they'd been waiting for, spent evenings researching neighborhoods with the best schools. For 3 years, they had prepared for this moment, the leap from their cramped 2-bedroom apartment to a home of their own, a place where 14-year-old Sasha could finally have the privacy teenagers craved, and 10-year-old Davis would have a backyard to channel his boundless energy. Their current living situation had become increasingly untenable. The apartment building on the east side of the city had seen better days. Water stains mapped the bathroom ceiling. The elevator worked only when it felt inclined, and their rent had increased by 12% in the last year alone. But beyond the physical constraints, Laila and Terrence wanted something more for their children: opportunity. Ridgewood Heights has the STEM academy Davis could attend, Terrence had pointed out one night, his finger tracing the school district boundaries on their tablet screen. And their arts program would be perfect for Sasha's photography. Laila had nodded, allowing herself to imagine her children thriving in classrooms with updated technology and dedicated teachers. The commute to the library would be longer for me, but it's worth it. They had done everything right. Credit scores polished to near perfection. Debt-to-income ratio calculated to the decimal. Pre-approval letters secured after answering the loan officer's subtly invasive questions with practiced patience. They were ready. The first viewing had been promising, a colonial-style home with a reading nook that made Laila's heart skip. The real estate agent, Perry Wilson of Elite Homes Realty, had been effusive over the phone when Terrence made the appointment. "It's just come on the market. You'll want to move quickly," he'd advised. Yet when they arrived, something shifted in Perry's demeanor. His smile remained, but it no longer reached his eyes as he took in the Hampton family standing on the doorstep. The enthusiastic descriptions of the property's features became perfunctory. When Sasha asked about the neighborhood, Perry's answers grew vague. "It's a very established community. Close-knit. People tend to stay for generations." 3 days later, they received a call. "I'm afraid that property has just gone under contract. So sorry to disappoint you." Undeterred, they scheduled viewings for 2 more homes in Ridgewood Heights. Each time, the pattern repeated: initial excitement over the phone, subtle cooling upon meeting in person, followed by properties mysteriously becoming unavailable. "It's a hot market," Perry explained with a casual shrug when Terrence expressed frustration. "Perhaps you might consider Westlake instead? More diverse area. Probably better suited for your family situation." Laila exchanged a glance with Terrence. Westlake had lower-ranked schools and was much farther from their workplaces. They had specifically saved for Ridgewood Heights. "We'd prefer to stay focused on Ridgewood," Laila replied firmly. "Our financing is solid, and we're approved for this price range." Perry nodded with what seemed like resignation. "Of course. I'll keep looking." The next property they visited was a 2-story Craftsman with a wraparound porch that immediately captured Laila's imagination. She could see Davis racing around the spacious backyard, Sasha doing homework on that porch, family dinners in the bay-windowed dining room. For the first time in weeks, Perry seemed genuinely helpful, pointing out the updated electrical system and nodding approvingly at the solid foundation. "The sellers are motivated," he mentioned. "I think we could get your offer in today and hear back quickly." Laila felt hope bloom in her chest as they drove home. the children already debating which bedrooms they would claim. I don't want to get too excited, Terrence cautioned as they prepared their offer that evening. But this one feels different. Laila agreed. They submitted an offer slightly above asking price, included a personal letter about their family, and waited. 2 days later, Perry called. Great news, he announced. The sellers were impressed with your offer. They just want to meet you briefly before accepting. A formality, really. They're the sentimental type, very attached to the house. Though unusual, the request didn't immediately raise alarms. Like an interview? Terrence asked skeptically. More like a courtesy meeting. They want to know the house is going to a family who will love it as they have. Tomorrow at 4 work for you. The following afternoon, the Hampton family dressed in their Sunday best. Davis even allowed Laila to comb his unruly curls without protest, sensing the importance of the occasion. Remember to compliment the garden, Laila whispered as they pulled up to the house. I noticed the seller's name on the rose competition plaque. What happened next would replay in Laila's mind for months to come. As they approached the house, Perry was already on the porch, speaking with an older white couple, presumably the sellers. When they spotted the Hamptons walking up the path, the couple's expressions shifted almost imperceptibly. The woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded curtly. Perry turned, his smile strained at the edges as he came down the steps to intercept them before they reached the porch. Ah, the Hamptons, he said, too loudly, too brightly. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. He glanced back at the couple, who were already retreating into the house. The sellers have just informed me they received another offer last night that they've decided to accept. Laila felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. But you said they wanted to meet us before deciding. Yes, well, Perry fidgeted with his tie. These things happen very quickly in this market. I apologize for the confusion. Did they even review our offer? Terrence asked, his voice level but tight. Of course. They were impressed, but ultimately decided to go another direction. Financial considerations, you understand. As Perry continued with his explanation, a car pulled into the driveway. A white family, also dressed neatly, also with 2 children. The father waved cheerfully at Perry, who visibly blanched. If you'll excuse me, he muttered, I have another appointment. Laila watched in disbelief as Perry greeted the new family warmly, ushering them toward the house where the sellers now reappeared, smiling genuinely as they opened their door in welcome. Mom, Sasha whispered, gripping Laila's arm. They're showing the house to them. Right now. The rain had started then, light at first, as they stood rooted in place. Terrence placed his hand on Davis's shoulder, turning him back toward their car. Let's go, he said quietly. But Laila hesitated, watching as Perry glanced back at them uncomfortably before closing the front door, shutting them out completely. Rain soaked through her carefully chosen blouse as understanding crystallized into certainty. She took a few steps toward the house, ignoring Terrence's gentle tug on her elbow. Laila, he warned softly. Not now? Not with the kids here. She stopped, not because she agreed, but because she saw Perry step onto the porch again, phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried across the yard as he turned away, obviously believing they had already left. Yes, those people won't be an issue anymore. The Carsons are here now, much more suitable for the neighborhood. I've told you before, we need to screen these calls more carefully. The words hung in the rain-heavy air as Laila finally allowed Terrence to guide her back to the car, where their children waited, Davis confused and Sasha's eyes blazing with a hurt that no child should have to comprehend. As they drove away from their dream home for the last time, the windshield wipers keeping rhythm with her pounding heart, Laila made a silent vow. This would not be the end of their story. Not by a long shot. The Hampton family drove home in silence broken only by the rhythmic sweep of windshield wipers. Davis stared out the window, tracing raindrops with his finger, too young to fully understand, but old enough to sense the heaviness in the car. Beside him, Sasha sat rigid, her jaw clenched, thumbs furiously tapping a message to her best friend. We should just keep looking, Terrence said finally as they pulled into their apartment complex. Maybe consider Westlake after all. Laila turned to him, disbelief flashing across her face. Did you not hear what that man said? Those people. He called us those people. Terrence. I heard him, he replied, knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. But we have 30 days left on our lease. 30 days to find somewhere to live. So we just accept it? Let them get away with it. Her voice rose slightly before she caught herself, glancing at the rearview mirror to check if the children were listening. They were, of course. They always were. Terrence sighed, the weight of practicality pressing down on his shoulders. We pick our battles, Laila. We need a home. That night, after tucking the children into bed, the conversation continued in hushed tones in their small kitchen. The familiar drip from the faucet punctuated their words like a metronome. It's not just about us, Laila insisted, nursing a cup of chamomile tea that did nothing to calm her simmering anger. If they're doing this to us, they're doing it to others. Our children are watching how we respond to this. Terrence ran his hands over his face, fatigue etched in every line. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying we have priorities. This is our priority, Laila countered. What message does it send to Sasha and Davis if we just roll over and accept being treated like we're not good enough for that neighborhood? The question hung in the air between them, unanswered but unavoidable. Later, as Terrence slept beside her, Laila found herself transported back to a memory she'd tucked away years ago. She was 9 years old, sitting in the back seat of her parents' Buick, a book open but unread on her lap. They had been looking at houses in a neighborhood called Maple Hills, her mother enchanted by the tree-lined streets, her father cautiously optimistic about the excellent school district. The realtor had shown them 3 homes that day, each tour growing progressively shorter, her smile increasingly strained. Outside the third house, Laila watched through the car window as the woman spoke to her parents on the sidewalk. I just don't think Maple Hills is the right fit for your family, the realtor said, voice gentle but firm. The community association is very particular. I'd hate for you to feel unwelcome. Her father nodded resignedly, but her mother stood straighter. Particular about what, exactly? Her mother pressed. The realtor's smile tightened. I'm just looking out for your best interests. On the drive home, her father was quiet until her mother finally broke the silence. We can't just accept this, Harold. Things will never change if we. It is what it is, Vivian, her father interrupted, exhaustion in his voice. Some doors aren't meant for us to walk through. Her mother turned to look out the passenger window, but not before Laila caught the gleam of tears in her eyes. Someday, things will be different, her mother whispered, more to herself than anyone. They have to be. Laila blinked back to the present, her mother's words echoing across the decades. Someday had arrived, and nothing had changed. Unless she changed it. The next morning, she called in sick to the library, something she'd done only twice in 7 years of employment. After dropping the children at school, she drove to the county records office. For hours, she pored over property records for Ridgewood Heights, making careful notes on her laptop. Patterns emerged like constellations: property transfers, demographic trends, housing complaints. The neighborhood had remained remarkably homogeneous despite the increasingly diverse city surrounding it. Over the next week, Laila built her case meticulously. She requested copies of their loan pre-approval, saved emails from Perry and other agents, and started a detailed journal of every interaction. She researched fair housing laws during lunch breaks and after the children went to bed. Terrence watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. One evening, as she sat cross-legged on their bed surrounded by printouts, he brought her a cup of coffee and sat beside her. You're really doing this, he said. Not a question, but a recognition. Laila looked up, dark circles under her eyes. I keep thinking about my mother. How defeated she looked that day. I don't want Sasha or Davis to ever feel that way. Terrence was quiet for a long moment before picking up one of her papers, scanning it thoughtfully. So what's the next step? He asked finally. A small smile spread across Laila's face, the first genuine one in days. I found a housing advocacy group. They're called Equal Foundations. I have an appointment tomorrow. The offices of Equal Foundations occupied the second floor of a modest building downtown. When Laila walked in, nervously clutching her folder of evidence, she was greeted by a woman whose commanding presence belied her small stature. Laila Hampton? I'm Carmen Washington, she said, extending her hand. Let's talk about what brought you here. For the next hour, Laila laid out everything. The subtle dismissals, the sudden unavailability of homes, Perry's revealing comment. Carmen listened intently, occasionally jotting notes, but mostly maintaining steady eye contact that made Laila feel truly heard. Unfortunately, Carmen said when Laila finished, your experience isn't unique. We've received 7 similar complaints about Ridgewood Heights in the past year alone. She swiveled her computer monitor to show Laila a map dotted with pins. Each of these represents a reported instance of potential housing discrimination. Notice the cluster around Ridgewood. Laila's heart sank and soared simultaneously, validation of her suspicions, but confirmation of a systemic problem. It's not just elite homes, Carmen continued. We're seeing coordinated practices across multiple agencies. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next. What do you mean? Laila asked. Carmen leaned forward, her expression serious. Fighting this means exposure, Laila. Your family will become visible in ways that might be uncomfortable. Some people will support you, others won't. And it could take time you may not have given your housing situation. The reality of their ticking clock hit Laila anew. Their lease would expire in 23 days now. They needed to find somewhere to live, discrimination case or not. As if reading her mind, Carmen added, we can help with temporary housing options if needed, but I want you to understand what you're potentially signing up for. That evening, Laila and Terrence sat the children down in their living room for a family meeting. The stakes had changed, and they deserved to be part of the conversation. We might not be moving to Ridgewood Heights, Terrence explained carefully, and we need to find a new place quickly. Because they don't want black people there, Sasha stated flatly, cutting to the heart of the matter with teenage directness. Laila and Terrence exchanged glances. Yes, Laila admitted. That appears to be the case. But we've found people who might be able to help us do something about it. Will they get in trouble? Davis asked, looking up from the robot figure he'd been fidgeting with. The people who lied to us? Maybe, Terrence answered. But more importantly, they might have to change their practices so other families don't experience what we did. But here's the thing, Laila continued. If we pursue this, it might mean some temporary changes for us. We might need to stay somewhere else for a while until we find our permanent home. Like a hotel? Davis perked up, visions of swimming pools dancing in his eyes. Not exactly, Terrence smiled ruefully. More like a short-term rental or staying with family. We also wanted to ask how you both feel, Laila added. Because this affects all of us. Sasha, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke. Aunt Zora always says if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. She straightened her shoulders. I think we should fight. Davis nodded vigorously beside her, though Laila suspected his agreement was more about supporting his sister than fully comprehending the situation. As the children disappeared back to their rooms, Terrence turned to Laila. 23 days, he said softly. And we've chosen the harder path. Laila took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses on his palm. The necessary one, she corrected. The next day brought news that raised the stakes even higher. Their landlord called to inform them that while he'd initially indicated they could extend their lease month to month if needed, he'd received an offer from a tenant willing to sign a year-long lease. I need to know your plans by Friday, he told Terrence. Otherwise, I'll have to move forward with the new applicant. It was Tuesday. They had 3 days to decide their housing future, while simultaneously launching a challenge against housing discrimination that could take months to resolve. That night, as Laila sat at their kitchen table updating her case notes for Carmen, a text message arrived from an unknown number. If you know what's good for your family, you'll drop this now. Some neighborhoods aren't for everyone. Pursue this further, and you'll find no doors open to you anywhere in this city. She stared at the screen, her hand trembling slightly, before calling Terrence over to see. His face darkened as he read the message. How did they even get your number? He asked, voice tight with controlled anger. I don't know, Laila whispered. But this proves we're onto something real. They wouldn't threaten us if they weren't worried. Terrence took the phone gently from her hand. It also means they're willing to go further than we thought. This isn't just about finding a house anymore, Laila. This is about our safety. The weight of their challenge settled over them both as rain began to patter against the apartment windows, echoing the storm they now found themselves in, one that would test their resolve, their relationship, and their faith in justice itself. The threatening text message changed everything. What had begun as a principled stand against housing discrimination now carried darker implications. Terrence insisted they file a police report, though Laila harbored few illusions about what actions the authorities might take over an anonymous text. Documented, the officer said as he finished taking their statement. Not much we can do beyond that without knowing who sent it. That night, sleep evaded Terrence. He sat in the darkened living room, the blue glow of his laptop illuminating his troubled face. Laila found him there at 3 a.m, scrolling through rental listings with increasing desperation. "We need a backup plan," he explained when she placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Somewhere safe for the kids, at least until this blows over." Laila sank onto the couch beside him. "Do you think it will blow over? Or are we pulling at a thread that unravels something bigger than we realized?" Terrence closed the laptop, darkness enveloping them save for the city lights filtering through the blinds. In that dim glow, his expression transported Laila to a vulnerability she rarely glimpsed in her steadfast husband. "My grandparents faced worse," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "Much worse." Charleston, 1963. Terrence's grandparents, Alvin and Ruby Green, packed everything they owned into a weather-beaten Chevrolet under cover of darkness. Their 2 young children slept in the back seat, unaware that they wouldn't return to the only home they'd known. Alvin had received a job offer at an automotive plant in Detroit, better wages, better opportunities. A chance to escape the suffocating limitations of the Jim Crow South. The journey north spanned 3/10 days. They avoided certain towns, stopped only at pre-vetted establishments, and kept driving when the children asked to rest. On the final stretch, they were followed by a pickup truck with glaring headlights for 20 harrowing miles until Alvin found a police station to pull into. Upon reaching Detroit, the promise of opportunity quickly collided with reality. Housing covenants restricted where they could live, invisible lines on city maps determining their fate as surely as the explicit, whites-only signs they'd left behind. They found an apartment in Black Bottom, cramped but clean, while Alvin searched for something more permanent. Each weekend, they drove neighborhoods where they hoped to settle, only to be told nothing was available, despite the forest of "for rent" signs dotting front yards. One evening, after another disappointing day of rejections, Alvin sat on their small balcony with 8-year-old Lloyd, Terrence's father, watching the sunset paint the city skyline. "Are we going to be stuck here forever, Pop?" Lloyd asked, gesturing to the decaying building around them. Alvin's weathered hand rested on his son's shoulder. "No, son. We'll find our place. And even if I don't, you will. Sometimes the fight isn't just for you. It's for those coming after." 2 months later, a white colleague at the plant quietly offered to front as the renter for a house in a better neighborhood. The risk was substantial for everyone involved, but they took it. The arrangement lasted 3 years before neighbors discovered the truth and the harassment began, subtle at first, then overt, culminating in a broken window and a warning to know your place. They moved again and again, each time carrying Alvin's quiet determination. The fight isn't just for you. Laila listened intently as Terrence shared his grandfather's story. Pieces of family history she'd heard before, but never with such raw emotion in her husband's voice. "My grandfather died still fighting for that place they belonged," Terrence concluded. "My father picked up that fight. Now here we are, 60 years later, still fighting the same battle." He rubbed his eyes tiredly. Just with different words, different excuses, but the same closed doors. In the stillness of their apartment, with their children sleeping down the hall, a decision crystallized between them, unspoken but understood. They would fight, not just for themselves, but for those who came before and those who would come after. The next day, Laila returned to Equal Foundations with news of the threatening text. Carmen's face grew serious as she examined it. "This changes our approach," she said, making a quick call to the organization's legal counsel. After a brief conversation, she turned back to Laila. We need to connect you with others who've experienced similar issues. Strength in numbers, protection in community. That Saturday, the Hampton family attended what was ostensibly a community barbecue at a local park. In reality, it was a carefully orchestrated meeting of 7 families who had encountered housing discrimination in Ridgewood Heights and surrounding desirable neighborhoods. Laila watched as Davis quickly joined a game of tag with children from the other families, while Sasha fell into conversation with a girl about her age whose family had been denied housing in Ridgewood twice. The adults gathered under a pavilion, introduction giving way to shared experiences that echoed with painful similarity. Bethany and Craig Foster had been told a house was sold minutes after arriving to view it, only to see it remain on the market for weeks afterward. The Chins had been quoted rental prices thousands above the advertised rate. Dr. James Wallace, a neurosurgeon, found that his impeccable credit score and substantial income somehow still rendered him financially unsuitable for certain properties. They've become more sophisticated, explained Harrison Powell, an older gentleman who served as Equal Foundation's lead attorney. Rarely will you hear explicit racial language. Instead, it's unavailable properties, sudden requirement changes, or steering families toward more suitable neighborhoods. Suitable meaning colored, Dr. Wallace remarked dryly. Powell nodded. But sophisticated doesn't mean untraceable. If enough patterns emerge, we can build a case. As the afternoon progressed, the gathering evolved from strangers united by discrimination to the beginnings of a community bound by purpose. Phone numbers were exchanged, a secure messaging group established, and committees formed to handle different aspects of what was quickly becoming a coordinated effort. Laila found herself appointed to document collection, gathering evidence from each family and organizing it coherently. Terrence, with his analytical mind, joined the data team tracking patterns of rejection across agencies and neighborhoods. For the first time since that rainy day outside the Craftsman house, Laila felt something beyond anger and frustration. She felt hope, flickering but persistent. Wow, this story is really heating up. If you're feeling as moved as we are by the Hampton family's fight for justice, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel right now. Your subscription helps us continue bringing these powerful stories of resilience to light. Where do you think this journey will lead? Tell us in the comments below. Now, let's return to see what challenges the Hampton family faces next. The hope kindled at the community gathering faced its first serious test 3 days later. As the deadline to inform their landlord about lease renewal approached, Laila developed excruciating migraines, stress manifesting physically as it often did when she pushed herself too hard. "You need to rest," Terrence insisted, placing a cool cloth on her forehead as she lay in their darkened bedroom. "Let me handle the meetings today." "Can't," she mumbled through the pain. "The Fosters are bringing their documentation this afternoon. Carmen needs my housing history spreadsheet by 5. Terrence gently removed the laptop from beside her. "I'll tell them you're sick. This will all be here tomorrow." But in the world of expiring leases and limited housing options, tomorrow always brought new urgency. Their landlord had granted a 3-day extension on their decision, but the clock continued its relentless countdown. Meanwhile, cracks appeared in the newly formed coalition. During an evening conference call, tension erupted when discussing next steps. "We need to file immediately," Dr. Wallace argued. "Every day we wait is another family turned away. Filing prematurely with insufficient evidence risks dismissal," countered Powell. "These cases are notoriously difficult to prove." Bethany Foster, whose family had been living with her parents for 4 months, couldn't hide her frustration. "That's easy to say when you have stable housing. Some of us are running out of options." The Chin family, who had school-aged children like the Hamptons, worried about switching districts mid-year if they couldn't find housing in their preferred area. "Perhaps we should focus just on elite homes first," Mrs. Chin suggested. "The broader pattern might take too long to establish. Narrowing our scope weakens the case," Powell cautioned. "This isn't just one bad apple. It's an orchard." As the call ended without clear consensus, Laila felt the weight of competing priorities. Justice moved slowly. Life did not. Families needed homes now, not after months of legal proceedings. That night, a second anonymous message arrived, this one to their shared email rather than Laila's phone. We know about your little group. Pursuing this will ensure none of you find housing in this city. Some lessons need to be taught the hard way. Attached was a photo of Davis getting off his school bus that afternoon. Terrence's reaction was immediate and visceral. He slammed the laptop closed with such force that both children looked up in alarm from the dinner table. That's it, he declared, his voice a controlled fury Laila had rarely witnessed. We're staying with my sister until this is resolved. But Dad, Sasha began to protest. This isn't a debate. He cut her off, then softened at her startled expression. I'm sorry, honey, but they crossed a line photographing your brother. Your safety comes first. Later, after the children were in bed, Laila and Terrence argued in harsh whispers in their bedroom. Running is exactly what they want, Laila insisted. If we back down, we prove intimidation works. I'm not risking our children to prove a point, Terrence countered. This isn't about pride anymore. It was never about pride. Laila's whisper rose dangerously close to full volume before she caught herself. It's about justice. It's about what your grandfather fought for, what my mother wished for. The mention of his grandfather landed heavily in the space between them. Terrence sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. 2 tracks, he said finally. We pursue the case, but from a position of safety. We stay with Jeanette for now, keep the kids secure, and fight from there. It was a compromise born of necessity rather than satisfaction, but Laila nodded her agreement. Some battles couldn't be fought from the front lines. The next morning, Laila contacted Carmen with news of the escalated threat. Within hours, Powell had obtained an emergency meeting with the judge, seeking protective orders for all families involved and formal preservation of evidence from the real estate agencies. While the legal wheels began turning, the practical matter of housing remained. With 48 hours left before they needed to vacate their apartment, Laila and Terrence accepted the reality of temporary relocation to his sister's house in Westlake. Ironically, the very neighborhood Perry had tried steering them toward. As Carmen explained during an emergency coalition meeting, their case had evolved from simple housing discrimination to criminal intimidation. This development attracted the attention of the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, adding federal weight to their previously local complaint. We're implementing a testing operation, Carmen explained to the gathered families in Equal Foundation's conference room. Pairs of volunteers, one white, one black, with identical financial profiles will attempt to rent or purchase homes through these agencies. Like secret shoppers, Mrs. Chen observed. Exactly, Carmen nodded. We've done preliminary testing already, and the results are compelling. White testers were shown an average of 5.7 properties in Ridgewood Heights, while black testers with identical qualifications were shown 1.2, and those were mostly at the neighborhood edges. The systematic approach brought renewed commitment from the wavering coalition members. Even as some families, like the Hamptons, made temporary housing arrangements, their collective resolve strengthened. That evening, as Laila packed essentials for their stay at Terrence's sister's house, she came across a photograph of her mother standing proudly before the small house her parents had eventually purchased, not in Maple Hills, but in a neighborhood where they'd been allowed to live. Her mother's words echoed across decades. Someday, things will be different. Laila carefully placed the photo in her bag. Someday had arrived, and she was determined to make her mother's words reality, not just for her family, but for all families who deserve the simple dignity of a home where they chose to put down roots. The Hampton family's first week at Terrence's sister Jeanette's house brought mixed emotions. Her modest 3-bedroom home in Westlake offered safety, but the doubled-up sleeping arrangements and extended commutes reminded them daily of what they'd lost and what they were fighting for. How long do we have to stay here? Davis asked one evening, his homework spread across Jeanette's kitchen table. Until we win, Sasha answered before her parents could, her teenage conviction unwavering. Meanwhile, Equal Foundation's investigation accelerated with unexpected momentum. The testing pairs documented stark differences in treatment. White testers received eager follow-ups. Black testers' calls went unreturned. White testers were shown premium properties. Black testers with identical financial profiles were directed to more affordable options in different neighborhoods. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A junior agent at Elite Homes named Marissa Reynolds contacted Carmen directly. "I can't be part of this anymore," she explained during a tense meeting at Equal Foundations. "There's an unwritten policy. They call it Community Compatibility Assessment. It's how they filter who gets shown what properties and where." Marissa provided screenshots of internal emails, including one from Perry's supervisor following the Hampton family's rejection, handled correctly. Maintaining neighborhood integrity is priority as per instructions from the association. Association? Powell asked, leaning forward. The Ridgewood Heights Community Association, Marissa clarified. They provide guidance to all major agencies about suitable buyers. It's never explicitly about race, but... She trailed off, the implication clear. This revelation expanded their case beyond individual realtors to include the association itself, the previously invisible hand guiding the systematic exclusion. Marissa's testimony, along with the internal communications she provided, became the cornerstone of a formal complaint filed with state and federal housing authorities. 3 days later, local media broke the story. Housing discrimination ring alleged in prestigious neighborhoods. The coverage sparked immediate reaction. Elite Homes issued denials. The Ridgewood Heights Community Association called the allegations baseless and defamatory. But as additional whistleblowers came forward, including a former association board member, the carefully constructed facade began crumbling. 38 days after being turned away in the rain, Laila found herself preparing to speak at a public hearing before the County Housing Commission. As she reviewed her testimony notes at Jeanette's dining table, her hands trembled slightly. "You'll be amazing," Terrence assured her, placing a cup of chamomile tea beside her laptop. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered. "What if they find technicalities, loopholes? Then we keep fighting," he replied simply. This was never going to be one battle. The morning of the hearing, as Laila dressed in her most professional attire, she was transported back to another moment, one that had shaped her more than she'd realized. 16-year-old Laila sat at her mother's vanity, watching her prepare for a neighborhood association meeting. The issue at hand, a proposed rezoning that would effectively maintain their neighborhood segregation through economic barriers. "Why bother going?" Laila had asked, teenage cynicism coloring her words. "They never listen." Her mother paused, lipstick midway to her lips. "Because silence is consent, Laila. But they'll just talk over you, or smile and nod and do what they want anyway." Her mother turned from the mirror, taking Layla's hands in hers. "Be brave, but be smart. Change happens when you make them see you as human. Not an abstraction, not a stereotype, but a mother, a neighbor, a person with dreams." She squeezed Layla's hands gently. "Some fights you lose, but you never lose by fighting." With her mother's words fortifying her spirit, Laila walked into the county building flanked by Terrence and their legal team. The hearing room buzzed with tension, representatives from Elite Homes and the Ridgewood Heights Association on one side, the coalition families on the other, media and community members filling every remaining seat. When called to testify, Laila approached the microphone with steady purpose. Behind professional composure, her voice carried the weight of generations who had faced closed doors and hollow excuses. "This isn't about one house or one family's disappointment," she began. "This is about American families being denied the fundamental right to choose where they live based solely on the color of their skin." She detailed their experience methodically, then widened the lens to include the pattern established by other families' testimonies. As she spoke, she noticed some commissioners leaning forward, truly listening. "My children asked me why we couldn't live where we wanted," she concluded. "What should I tell them? That in 2025, some dreams still aren't meant for families like ours? Or that when faced with injustice, we stood up not just for ourselves, but for every family that deserves the simple dignity of a home where they choose to put down roots?" The commission's decision came 3 weeks later. Substantial evidence of discriminatory practices had been found. Elite Homes faced significant penalties, mandatory training, and monitoring. 3 agents, including Perry, were suspended pending licensing review. The Ridgewood Heights Community Association received formal censure and orders to cease interference in housing transactions. It was a victory, but like most real-world victories, incomplete and bittersweet. The Hampton family still had no permanent home, having extended their stay with Jeanette while continuing their housing search. Then came the unexpected development. Alexandria Bennett, a Ridgewood Heights resident who had attended the hearing, reached out through Equal Foundations. "I was disturbed by what I learned," she explained during their first phone call. "A group of us in Ridgewood want to help." Initially skeptical, Laila met Alexandria at a neutral coffee shop. She found not a white savior seeking credit, but a genuinely troubled neighbor who had mobilized a homeowners coalition of her own, Ridgewood for All. "We're challenging the association from within," Alexandria explained. "And we wanted you to know about a property coming available on Oak Ridge Lane. The seller is part of our group and specifically wants to ensure an open bidding process." 2 months after the hearing, the Hampton family received the keys to their new home. Not the craftsman they'd originally lost, but a sun-filled colonial on a corner lot in Ridgewood Heights, purchased at fair market value without obstacles. 1 year later, the housewarming party spilled from the Hamptons' backyard onto their spacious deck, where Terrence manned the grill with practiced confidence. Davis kicked a soccer ball with the Chun children in the side yard, while Sasha showed her photography portfolio to Bethany Foster's daughter. Among the guests were familiar faces from their journey: Carmen and her team from Equal Foundations, Alexandria, and several Ridgewood for All members, even Marissa Reynolds, who had since started her own real estate practice dedicated to fair housing. Laila watched from the kitchen window, a deep contentment washing over her. The house was everything they'd hoped for, but more importantly, it represented a door forced open that could never be closed again. Carmen joined her at the window. "The settlement funds are helping 5 more families fight similar cases," she shared. "Your case set precedent." Later, as twilight softened the edges of their new neighborhood, Laila raised a toast in their living room. "To homes," she began, "which are more than buildings. They're places where we belong, where we're safe, where we build futures." She looked at the diverse faces gathered in her living room, a community that had formed through struggle and solidarity. "And to all of you, who reminded us that the most important foundation of any home is justice." That night, after guests departed and children slept, Laila and Terrence sat on their front porch swing, his arm around her shoulders. "We should put your mother's picture on that wall," Terrence said, gesturing toward the entryway. "And my grandfather's too." Laila nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. "They'd be proud. Not just that we're here, but how we got here." From inside came the gentle, settling sounds of their new home, their place in the world that no one could deny them. A home built not just of wood and brick, but of principle and persistence, of doors forced open for those yet to come. Thank you for joining us for this powerful journey of resilience and justice. If this story moved you, please hit subscribe and the notification bell right now to ensure you never miss our next empowering narrative. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know experienced housing discrimination? What steps can we all take to create more inclusive communities? Your voice matters in this ongoing conversation. Remember, change happens one story, one stand, one community at a time. Subscribe now to be part of our growing family dedicated to sharing these important truths.